Hi, everyone. It has been a long time. I skipped the summer months of July and August to give myself a break and to come up with some fresh content to finish out the year. And so I want to welcome you if you're here with me live. And as always, I say let me know you're here by putting your comments in the field. Tell me where you're from and your name. Sometimes it'll say LinkedIn user, so you might want to say your name. And I will recognize different people throughout this presentation. Today, I also want to welcome you if you're listening to the recorded version. And I hope that this gives you so much insight about leadership and your own growth and really takes you to the next level. So that's my goal. And today we're going to be talking about, I'm calling this one Inner Game 101. Inner Game 101, Personal Growth for Transformational Leaders. So this is what I'm really making the point about. Personal growth is leadership growth. So we talk about those as if they're two separate things so often. But I'm making the statement that personal growth is indeed leadership growth. It's a big part of it. No matter how many soft skills you learn, it's really about that inner game that transforms leadership. So we're really going to talk about how to tap into the power of narrative to shift old patterns to new possibilities that will actually transform not only your leadership, but also your life. So here's the disconnect. I'm going to share that, then I'm going to check in and see who's here, and then we're going to get into the content. The disconnect is that leadership growth is different than personal growth. But what I know is that you can take every single certification, and I know I've got 5 different programs on LinkedIn Learning on the platform, the global platform, and a lot of people get my courses and they take the certification, and I'm thrilled, and I hear people saying it changes their life and it changes their leadership. But here's the thing. You can take every single certification, and it's only going to get you so far. The real foundation is about building conflict capacity first, and I'm going to share that. I've talked about that once before. I'm going to go over that again, and then we're going to talk about some things you can do. So I'm going to say hi to some people. Hi to Elizabeth. Happy to be here. Norwich, Connecticut. Good to see you. Hi, Josh from South Africa. Love to have a very diverse audience. Jamie from Massachusetts. And hi there, Eunice, I hope I'm saying that right, from Miami, Florida. It's your first one. Oh, thank you for showing up. I remember inviting you. And here's another, a new Jamie Lynn, first one. So glad, and feel free to post your thoughts and comments. I will go back after this live and I'll answer any questions if I don't see it while I'm talking, because you have to multitask a lot. And so I'm not the greatest at that, but I'm so glad you're all here, and I know more people are going to come. And I always say, if you got value from this, or if you can't even watch it all and you want to see it later, it should show up on your thread today. So feel free to reshare that for other people to see it. So the foundation is building conflict capacity. And in my latest book that I just published, this is it, From Conflict to Courage, How to Stop Avoiding and Start Leading. I give a model, and I've done that model once on a previous live that I've done, but I want to show it to you here. Let's see if I can find it. I always put this overlay up, and I'm going to talk about this overlay just for a minute. So building conflict capacity is really about 3 specific intersections. So first of all, there's this outer game. That's when you're taking, the LinkedIn Live, when you're learning things, you're reading a book, you're going to a workshop, you're doing some online learning, you're studying soft skills. So that outer game is about skills, tools, and techniques. And then when it comes to leadership, really in your own life or in your company, in your organization, there's also this aspect of culture. And what I have discovered over the years is that if you're trying to be a good leader and you've defined what that is, and you're trying to have conversations and you're trying to right the ship, if the top leadership doesn't support those efforts, or they pull the rug out from under you, or you feel blindsided, or they have a culture where we're all just supposed to always get along and be nice, and we're the Stepford wives and we don't even talk about bad things. If you're in that kind of culture, you're going to have a really difficult time succeeding because the structures aren't set up for it. And so what is often missing from leadership growth and from soft skills training and from every other piece that that helps you to be a really the fullest leader you can be, the best at your best, is that inner game. And I am going to be spending a lot of time in this next year talking about personal development and the inner game. The inner game is self-awareness, emotional integrity, desire, and willingness. And so that I'm going to explain more on that because I could do a whole session just on the components of that. So I'm going to talk about now the narrative, the inner part of the inner game. A real big part of it is your narrative and how that affects your life and your leadership. What I know is that you cannot be a critical thinker unless you understand how to tap into your narrative and how that's influencing the way that you think about yourself, your own identity, and how it's influencing your behavior without you even knowing it. So the first question would be, what is narrative? What is narrative? All right, so what is narrative? Well, it is the story that you tell yourself. It's the story that you tell yourself about yourself. It's the story that you tell yourself about the situation. It's the story that you tell yourself about someone else's motives without you even being aware of it. We're often not aware of our narrative. That's why self-awareness and understanding narrative is so, so important. And we can be self-aware in certain components and yet totally unaware that our thoughts are influencing us on this level that's very much a subconscious level. This is something I've worked on. I'm going to share a little bit of my story on how I've worked on my narrative really for 24 years, but especially even in this last year, which has been pretty difficult in a lot of ways. So we don't notice our narrative. It goes unnoticed. And here's what it sounds like. If you look at social media today, you can find all kinds of arguments and narratives that are going on. I saw one recently where someone made they perceived that they were not being supported in a specific situation. They perceived that it was because of um, their nationality, I believe. And 5 or 6 other people, 10 people jumped on without even having all the facts. And I thought to myself, could it be that, or could it have just been a rude person that's that way to everyone? So when we make an assumption that, well, it's because I'm a woman, it's because I'm gay, it's because I'm of a color, it's because I'm of a race. If we make the assumption right off the beginning, we're not even giving a chance for another story to unfold. And while it could be true, there may be 4 or 5 other possibilities as well. And so I really try to be careful about making an assumption about why someone does something. Maybe they're just not a very aware person, not a good person. And so we just say, well, what other reason could it be? Versus it could be all kinds of things. That person could have had a bad day. That person could not know they're coming off that way. All kinds of reasons, but we make an assumption, and sometimes it's a grounded assumption, and we believe that assumption. Or we say things to ourselves like, wow, I look really terrible today, or they're ignoring me, or I hope I don't mess up this presentation. We make up stories all the time. And the problem is not that we make up the stories. That's not the problem, because that is what our brain is going to do. So don't try to stop making up stories. It's just how your brain works. It has to work that way. We make up stories and we believe them. That is the problem, is that we believe everything we think. I'm going to check in just for a second and see who else is here. Hi, we've got someone from the UK. So glad you're here. And Vicky, oh, Vicky from BJing for subtitles in Spanish and Portuguese. I don't know what that means. Okay, so glad you're here. Hey, Gerald, I have not talked to you in a long time. I'm so glad to see you here. And Amber Jackson from Iowa City. Yes, I'm excited about you growing too. And here is a friend, a new friend of mine. Hey, Melody, so glad you're here. This is, I think, one of your first LinkedIn experiences. And then Bashmar from Iraq. So glad to have you. Great to have everybody here. I want to share some facts about thinking. This is going to help you understand where I'm coming from. The brain, your brain, changes as a function of where you put your attention. Every time you vent, you grow a new brain cell for the purpose of venting. That's from Ellen Weber, PhD, director of MITA, MITA, I guess is how it's pronounced, International Brain-Based Center. So there's people that studied this. So what does that mean? If every time you vent, you grow a new brain cell for venting, every time you believe a certain story about your life, every time you believe only one version, you grow a new connection, a thicker branch for that to be true for you. And that's all you will see, even if there are other possibilities. The brain is wired for negativity. This is another one. This is from Rick Hansen. I interviewed him a very long time ago for an online program that I had, but he's the author of many books. The one that I was reading at the time was called Buddha's Brain. He's a not a neuroscientist, but a neuropsychologist, I believe. But he said the brain is actually wired for negativity. He said it's like Teflon for the positive and Velcro for the negative. And the reason is our brain wants to protect us. So when someone says something that feels threatening, that's all we focus on. And it's wired to just look for that kind of stuff of how people are against us or how someone's threatening us or not believing in us. So we just have to know that's how the brain works. And there might be another possibility. So we have to like hear it, notice it, but not believe everything. Learn how to question what you believe. The last one I have, and there's lots of different pieces on this where you'll get different numbers. I'm just going to share with you what I have from Heart Math Institute. What they do is they study the brain and the heart and how they work together to create what they call coherence. Wonderful book, From Chaos to Coherence. It's a book I read a long, long time ago, but I love their work. In their book, it says we think over 60,000 thoughts per day, and 85% of those thoughts are negative or repetitive. What that means is that negativity is a habit for most people. So here's what you need to know about the narrative. So I wanted to lay that out about how the brain works so that you can kind of understand that you're not crazy, you're not alone, you're not a negative person. We are wired certain ways. And if we don't build a strong inner game, we're run by that inner game and we don't know why. We are run by our subconscious programming and by our old habits and by the ways we see the world. And we'll look for confirmation. It's called confirmation bias. We'll look for that in order to support being right about how we see things. So here's what you need to know about narrative. And then I'm going to talk about steps to transform your life and your leadership by changing your story, by doing it very consciously. And when I say changing your story, I don't mean making up a new story that's not true in any form. I mean by reframing how you're experiencing life, because once you change the interpretation, you actually change the experience. And I hope I can make that point really clear on this small little webinar that we're doing today, this live stream. Um, so the first piece you need to know about narrative and story is this: the story you tell is the life you live. So if you're constantly saying, well, it would only happen to me. Now I'm going to admit something. I say that sometimes about technology. Well, I set this live stream up. It didn't go off. It would only happen to me. No one else has those kind of problems. But I have to be aware of when I do that, and I have to stop saying that, because that doesn't help me to learn where I'm making mistakes, or even learn to accept that sometimes things just happen, and they happen to everybody all the time, depending on how often you're online. So the story you tell is going to build the pathway for the life that you live. The next piece I want to share with you, which has actually changed my life to understand this, and that is your story is the source of your suffering. It is not your circumstance that is the source of your suffering. It's not your life situation that's the source of your suffering. It's not the family that you were born into. What is the source of your suffering is your story, the way that you're interpreting the situation. Here's where I want to tell you a little bit about my own situation. At the beginning of the year, my mom had some health problems that just escalated, and she ended up going to skilled nursing, which then more problems led into full-time nursing care. Very stressful. If anybody's been through that, you know what I mean. Very, very stressful. I was so bone tired when I was dealing with selling the house she lived in, which actually belongs to me, because she was going to have to live there, getting her set up on Medicaid, doing the things that are really very emotionally draining, and trying to keep her feeling supported and comfortable and being there every single day when so much business was coming in for me. And it was coming in for me because I had just authored a new book, and I had just authored a new program for LinkedIn Learning. And a part of me felt resentful and tired, and I was suffering. And I remember feeling so depressed at one point that I decided, well, what would I do if I were coaching someone? How would I take my own medicine? Because I can tell you that coaching is different than when you're living it, because when you're coaching someone, you're on the outside supporting someone, and you're not feeling all the emotions. But when you're in the problem, it feels different. You know that. I always say we all know the answers in a workshop. So I always spend private time every morning. I have a morning routine. And I got my journal out and I said, if I were coaching someone, what would I say? Because I'm really distraught. I'm tired. I'm really quite miserable. And what came to me is that the story is the source of my suffering. So then I said, well, what story am I telling myself about this? Am I saying this shouldn't happen? Am I saying it would happen to me right when things really begin to explode and I get all these opportunities? And then I realized that I was seeing this situation as an obstacle instead of an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to get clear and an opportunity to just say, this is part of my life. And it's about, I'm supposed to have this experience because I am having it. And so when I changed the journaling, when I changed the story about this is my life, it's not an obstacle, it's a choice. And the choices are hard right now. And I have to say no to things I would love to do, but I'm trusting the journey. I'm trusting what I'm supposed to know from this. And so then I was just able to just journal about my gratitude for everything I'm learning and for how this is making me more compassionate for the elderly and how this is making me realize that we're all going really toward the aging process. So that's a very personal story, but I really hope it helps someone that is maybe going through that, or you're suffering in some way because you've got an illness or you're dealing with a family member that you love and that affects your leadership journey. I want you to realize that we don't live in separate compartments. And so when we learn to look at narrative, whether it's in our life or whether it's with an employee that's hard to get along with, or whether you need to have a conversation with someone 2 or 3 layers above you in power and authority, you have to understand that what's making you suffer is not them. It's the story that you're telling yourself about it. So I hope that that makes sense. And I hope that that is helpful. The final piece that you need to know about narrative is this: when you want to change one of your behaviors, whether it's blowing up, whether it's avoiding, whether it's just getting aggressive, whether it's appeasing, whatever you're doing to manage your stress in any given situation in your life or in your leadership role, if you want to change your own behavior, you have to first change the story. And you can't change the story if you don't own it, if you don't notice it. That takes quiet time. It takes self awareness. You can read all the books in the world and it will not help you, because this is the work that only you can do. A certificate won't do it, a college degree won't do it. This is work that only you as a human being can decide to do. And I think that's wonderful that we have that choice. The same thing with an employee. If you, I always talk about bringing up the observed behavior, but what you need to understand about the behavior is there's a story underneath it. And so if you can go a little deeper, once you identify the behavior that you want to change, you can then say there must be something they're telling themselves to make the decisions that they're making, and even to have the unconscious behaviors and actions that they have. There has to be something that's driving that. It's how they see themselves. They feel justified, or it's how they see other people. They see other people as their persecutor instead of a collaborator. So how we see ourselves and what we tell ourselves about who we are and how we see other people is going to drive the relationship. And so that's why narrative is such a big part of personal growth, and why that personal growth is so much of your leadership journey. I'm going to check in real quick. Is there anybody else new that wants to speak up? Hey there. Hi, Elena. Yes, reframing is so helpful. So helpful. And I try it all the time. And Bandana, this from New York. Hey, so glad you're here. Hey, another friend that I speak to quite a bit. Our brains are hardwired for survival, and the best way to survive is do nothing. Sometimes that's what we think too, or else we do something that we regret. Well, I want to share now some steps for transforming your life and leadership by changing the story. And again, these are just steps. I'm going to go through these really quickly. You're going to have to do the inner work for this to really work. But I believe that if you'll take these notes while we're talking, and you can try some of these, you can later on get on the thread, or, you know, direct message me and tell me how it's shifting you. Because I know that once I start changing my story, and there's some good news that I want to share in the future that I can't share now because it's kind of a surprise, but um, I want to be able to share it with you later about how I have changed some of my stories. Someone's asking me a question. What if you don't know what you were doing wrong? I thought I was being underconfident and unacknowledgeable, and I asked my old coworker. She said I came across as too confident. Wow, that's a great question. I think it's bold of you to ask, and it might just be her story, right? Maybe you're not doing anything wrong. Who knows? Like, if that's a story of I'm doing something wrong, It's just information. So maybe you're not being too confident. I'm not going to tell you to change your level of confidence. That's just how someone sees you. I would say if you want to know more, ask other people, do they see you as that way? And why is that a problem? Is it because once you're confident, they don't trust what you're doing? But like ask yourself if you're telling a story that you think you're doing something wrong versus just someone sees me that way. And that's one opinion out of thousands. So that's what I would say to you, Danielle. Okay, so the first step we're going to do is we're going to become the witness to our story. So again, I just shared with you my story with a nursing home. It had become an obstacle instead of life. Here's the tip. When you notice suffering, this is the key. When you notice suffering, don't do something to dissipate the suffering. Don't go gambling, don't go drinking, don't go gossiping, don't be making it about someone else and what they did wrong. When you notice your own suffering, yours or someone else, just know there's a story attached. So you might even create some columns, like column 1, I'm suffering. What what kind of story is there? Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is ask yourself, this is where if you have columns, what could be equally true? So step 2 is about challenging the narrative. Like, is that the only truth there is? Because if that's what you believe, that's a problem. So what you're going to do is you're going to frame it differently. You're going to try different frames on. And don't get so far out there that there's no way that's true. Like, no, I am happy. That's my new story. No, I'm not happy, but maybe unhappiness is a sign for me to change something. And I start interpreting it that way versus I'm unhappy and it's someone's fault. And if this wouldn't have happened, I would have been happy to say, well, I'm unhappy, but that's giving me contrast. It's making me know that I need to speak up. It's making me know that I really wanted something that I hadn't expressed. So it's about changing the interpretation. What could be equally true? That it's okay that I'm unhappy, that my unhappiness leads me to good decisions sometimes because it gives me more clarity. Could it equally be true that life is full of hills and valleys? And I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying there's space in me to have the unhappiness and I don't have to be completely happy all the time. It might mean that I'm comparing myself. For me, that's what it means a lot of times. It's I'm comparing myself and I'm not feeling like enough. And I don't think enough people will admit that. But that's really, that's a story that's not going to make you happy because there's always someone better. And it's okay that they're better. We have plenty to be successful about. And so here's another one, what I'm learning about because of this. Here's what I'm learning. So for myself, I'm like, I'm learning where I lack capacity. I'm learning how to get more present and to be with just today. I'm getting to learn now how to both plan and to also adapt. So these are things that I'm really taking note of so that I can share with other people later. And step 3, so I'm going to repeat step 1 is become the witness to your story. Step 2 is, challenge the narrative. What could equally be true? Step 3 is give gratitude for what you're learning. I use a gratitude journal all the time. And if you really make the time for it when you're suffering to first challenge the narrative, like notice the narrative, what's the story, then to challenge it, um, yes, I will repeat. I sure will. Someone said, could you repeat them? I will repeat all of them in a second. So when you're giving gratitude, you find one small thing. I'm gratitude for what I'm learning. And here's what I'm going to do with what I'm learning. And I'm in gratitude that this didn't happen 2 years ago when I wasn't ready. And I'm in gratitude that I'm mature enough to make choices that will serve me for the rest of my life. And I'm grateful that I trust in abundance and there's more to come even when I have to say no now, that I'm going to keep doing the good work that I'm doing and there's more that will come, and that maybe right now with COVID there's opportunities I don't need to take anyway. So we learn how to be grateful. So I'm going to repeat all of them and then we'll go into the fourth one. Number 1 is to become witness to your story. Just say, I even practice saying this. When I perceive something, I'll say, and I perceive this is what that means. Or I'll say the story I'm telling myself, like let's say that I think to myself, oh, they don't care at all. And they're not giving me a chance because I'm a woman. I'll say, okay. So I'll say, I'm disappointed that I didn't get a chance and I'm perceiving I didn't have a chance. And I also have a story about it being because I'm a female. Could that be true? Like I become a witness to what I'm telling myself about it. Thank you so much. Jonathan said, this is so powerful. Yeah, that's why, hey there from India, that's why leadership growth is personal growth. I'm just going to claim it. It doesn't sound businesslike to say it, but you will not grow as a real leader without learning how to think critically and learning how to make your own life happy, to become the creator the most powerful creator of your own life. That's part of my mission, is to help people become the creative force in their own life. You can't do it without changing your narrative. Your brain is not going to allow you to do it. Your life experience is going to tell you that you're a victim. That's just how it's going to be. No matter how privileged you are, you're going to see where you're a victim. That's just how it's going to be for all of us. We all have biases. So once you know that, you get rid of all that. That's just like noise. So what we're going to learn is these steps to start recreating, building relationships that we never thought we could have because we're not afraid. We're not living in fear. We're living in openness. So step four is what I call release the bondage. So step four is release, and I'll read those again in a minute for those that are just joining. I'm going to read something here from one of my friends that I talked to a bit. To help break free of old patterns needs good. Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. The environment is so important, especially in the workplace. Our inner environment is what I'm talking about today, but in the workplace, if leaders can provide the right environment, that's that cultural piece and the possibility of converting more than one. Yeah, there's many leadership styles and there's many philosophies on that. So I love that you brought that diversity to the table. So thank you so much, Hussein. So the last one is release the binding. There's a saying, and this comes from a spiritual background, and so I hope you can see the universal truth in this. Um, what is bound on earth is bound in heaven. What does that mean? If I'm holding a grudge now, I'm blocking every good thing that could come my way because I'm in bondage to that resentment, to that belief that other people don't care for me, to belief that I can't succeed, belief that because of my background, my gender, my future, belief that I can't have and be and do, that will bind me. And that will be the one thing that binds me the most, even though the other things may have some truth in them. So this is my advice on this because I work on releasing resistance a lot. In fact, it's one of the chapters in my book, and I talk about it from the perspective of leadership and not personal growth, but I want to share the personal growth part of it here. You have to become aware of attachments to things to how things should be versus how they are. We all struggle in this area. If you've ever said, this should not be happening, which I use that language in some of my work, like what's happening that should not be happening. So I'm using it in a little bit of a different context. But what I'm saying here is that if I was saying this should not be happening to me because of the success I'm having, then I'm attached to a fantasy land that's not reality for me. So how do you know if something should be happening? Because it is happening. So you make peace with reality first. It's not like you surrender and give up and, oh, well, it always happens to me. That's a different thing. But when you say it's happening because it is supposed to happen, I now know that I'm starting from presence and I make peace with what is happening. And then I choose to change it. I choose to take next right steps. I choose to set new vision. So the next question is, what do you need? What is it that you think you need from someone, from your boss, from your employee, from your coworkers? What is it that you need? Because that's going to make you suffer. So get clear on what's making you suffer, what you think you need from someone that they can't or won't give you. So I do an exercise that I call canceling the need. And I say, I cancel the need for them to understand. I canceled the need for them not to yell because I can set a boundary. I don't have to listen to someone yelling at me or calling me names. I canceled the need for them to behave appropriately because I still have power in what I allow. I cancel the need to compare myself to someone else. I cancel my need to think I've got to be at someone else's level or that they've got to be at mine. I cancel the need to see people as different. I cancel that need because I will see people as equally empowered. And so we start to cancel in our conscious decision of the thing we think we need. And then finally we make a distinction between preference and demand. So we make a distinction, like what I prefer is something I prefer. I don't demand it because there's still always choices. And so someone asked me which book, and I hope you're asking me about mine. I'm going to show you. It's From Conflict to Courage. I have some exciting news about that book. It did win a nomination for an international award, and I was really surprised about it. But it's in the from Get Abstract. It's won a nomination for an international nomination for learning impact. It's full of tips and steps just like this that I've given you today. So that's the four things you can do to start creating a new story. That's become a witness to the story, become aware of it, Ask yourself what could equally be true. In other words, challenge it, give gratitude for what you're learning, and then release your bondage to what you think should be so that you can get present and then make significant strategic change from there. So, give you some calls to action. Get the book From Conflict to Courage on Amazon. Share this on your own profile if you got value, and let me know in the threads what you got out of this, or what you disagree with. Even is fine. If you want to get my weekly message from Marlene newsletter, please go sign up. It's in the little ticker below. It's at www.marlenechisholm.com. I believe I'm going to do something in October. I've had to change the date because I'm going to travel, but stay tuned. I have one coming up about communication and difficult conversations and 4 traps to avoid. That's coming up, and I hope you'll join me then. Bye, everyone.